Colleagues, if you could begin to take your seats, please insert your voting cards so that we can tell if we have a quorum or not. We're a long way away at the moment. Thank you. We're still a little short of a quorum, so if we could ask delegates, take your seats, insert your voting cards, please, so we can begin. Good morning, everybody. We now have a quorum, so we can begin. Thank you for turning up on time after a late night, and again, thank you for your attendance and persistence last night. We made quite a lot of progress. So this morning, just a quick report from the Bureau that there's been no change in the number of credentials since yesterday. So I won't go to the chair of the Credentials Committee for a report. We're exactly the same as we were then. My plan this morning, as you've seen, is to work through a series of working documents which essentially should have been done or were in our working program for last Friday morning. So we'll begin with document 11. But before I do that, I would quite like to catch up on a few summary records. So I'm going to begin with COM1 Rec 8, being the summary record of the 8th session of Committee 1, which was held on the 18th of November. So I invite your comments for any corrections or mistakes you may have identified. I see Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the COM1 Rec 8, in page 1, in the last line of the second paragraph, Japan would like to suggest adding the following sentence, which would read, Japan further expressed a deep concern about the application of so-called look-alike provision. This is number one. And number two, in page 2, in the last part of the fourth paragraph, Japan suggests adding the following sentence, which would read, Japan also asked parties to recall an agreement at COP19 that coastal states be responsible for the conservation and management of sea cucumbers, period. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Japan. I think we've captured both those comments. I don't see any other requests for the floor. So with those amendments, we take that as being adopted as our record of the 8th session of this committee. So COM1 Rec 8 is adopted with amendments. We now move on to COM1 Rec 9, being the summary record of the 9th session of Committee 1 held on the 19th of November. So with that, I open the floor. I don't see any requests for the floor. So with that, we adopt COM1 Rec 9 as the summary record of our business on the 9th session, which was held on the 18th of November. And then the final summary record that we can consider today is COM1 Rec 10, being the summary record of the 10th session of Committee 1 held on the 21st of November. Are there any comments or requests? I do not see any, so again, we can adopt this as being a record of our business on that day. So COM1 Rec 10 is adopted. We will move on to further summary records when they are available and have been online for a sufficient period of time. So I ask you to keep your eyes on the website for new additional documents and consider them carefully. Just one moment, please. We now move on to the substantive part of our agenda for this morning. We begin with Item 11, on Appendix 1, listed species, a document that has been submitted by the Animals and Plants Committees, and I invite one of the chairs to introduce it. So I give the floor to the chair of the Animals Committee.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. As you mentioned, this document has been submitted by the Plants and Animal Committees on behalf of whom I will introduce it. At COP18, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 1828 and 1829 on the Appendix 1 species. They were directed to the Secretariat, the Animals Committee, and the Plants Committee. The decisions directed the Secretariat to conduct a rapid assessment of the conservation status of and legal and illegal trade in species included in Appendix 1. Produce detailed assessments on the conservation status, threats, relevance of trade, ongoing in situ and ex situ conservation strategies or recovery plans, and funding resources available or required for the species concerned and selected. And third, produce a report identifying and prioritizing those Appendix 1 species that could potentially benefit from future action under CITES and submit that report to the Animals and Plants Committee for their consideration. The Animals and Plants Committee were then tasked to review the report results and make recommendations for communication to the range states and the COP as appropriate. The Secretariat commissioned the rapid assessment to WCMC in collaboration with IUCN. An informal advisory group was formed to assist the Secretariat in the implementation of this decision. WCMC produced the first provisional list of 31 Appendix 1 species that were consistently ranked as high, which might be considered for further assessments as per paragraph A, Roman 2 of Decision 1828. At AC 31, PC 25, the joint meeting of the two committees, the Secretariat presented these results and proposed an additional criterion for selection of species that could focus on trade demand for wild specimens, taking into account the impact of captive breeding. The Secretary further indicated that it accepted an offer from the University of Applied Sciences Van Hal-Larenstein in the Netherlands to have several students work on the implementation of Decisions 1828 as part of their final dissertations. The committee noted that it would not be possible to fully implement Decision 1828 and 1829 prior to the CoP19 and agreed to propose the extension of activities and mandates in these decisions beyond CoP19. They further agreed to invite the Secretariat to undertake the following: to continue the collaboration with University of Applied Sciences Van Hal-Larenstein in the Netherlands in carrying out the analysis of a selection of Appendix 1 species, and in consultation with the Plants and Animals committees through their chairs and invited experts to further refine the methodology and its criteria for carrying out an assessment of species listed in Appendix 1 and draft decisions for submission to the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to ensure the further advancement of this work, including the possible development of an ongoing assessment of Appendix 1 listings under the CITES provisions. However, following AC 31, PC 25, the Secretariat informed the chairs of the Animals and Plants Committee that regrettably, as a result of administrative challenges encountered by the students at the University of Applied Sciences Van Hal-Larenstein, which could not be resolved, the working arrangement with the university was no longer viable. As a result, the Secretariat committed to complete the detailed reviews for the 10 species contained in the table of this document at the top of page 4. Following consultations with the range states and the relevant experts, these case studies will be ready for consideration by the Animals and Plants Committees at their first meeting following CoP19. Further refinement of the methodology and its criteria for future detailed assessment of Appendix 1 listed species can only be undertaken when the results of these case studies are reviewed by the Animals and Plants Committees. The Animals and Plants Committees therefore proposed the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to the present document. The Conference of the Parties is therefore invited to adopt the draft decision presented in Annex 1 of the present document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee, and I open the floor for comments by parties. So I see Israel, followed by the United States.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for the floor. This whole process began a number of years ago because there continues to be a large amounts of trade in Appendix 1 species, and according to the CITES trade database, a lot of it is with code T indicating commercial trade, apparently in contra to the convention. And that's what began this investigation of trade in Appendix 1 species. In our mind, this is a very important exercise that is conducted, and we support, of course, the recommendations to continue the work analyzing this issue. However, the draft decisions directed to the Secretariat seem to have watered down a bit of the importance of this, and we would suggest a couple of small edits. First of all, in Decision 19.AA, the Secretariat, in consultation with the relevant states, produce detailed assessments and conservation status threats And in the next part where it says relevance of trade, we would prefer to, instead of relevance of trade, to change it to impacts of legal and illegal trade. And at the end of this paragraph, the same draft decision, it says at least 10 species, and it loses the point of which species we're talking about. So instead of at least 10 species, or I'm sorry, not instead of, but as well as, add at the end of that, from those listed in the table in paragraph 15 of document CoP19 Doc 11. That's the specific 10 species that came out of the initial review. So it would refer exactly which 10 species. I'll say that again. At least 10 species from those listed in the table in paragraph 15 of Doc CoP19 Doc 11. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. I think we've got your suggested changes. I give the floor to the United States, followed by Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States partially supports the Secretariat's amended draft decisions outlined in Annex 1 of document COP19 Doc 11. While the U.S. supports the Secretariat's amendments for draft decision 19AA, the U.S. does not support the Secretariat's amendments in 19B. We do not support the removal of 19BB little b and amendment of 19BB C regarding the methodology and refinement and criteria process for selecting Appendix 1 species for review. These amendments would result in a delay of the discussion to refine the assessment criteria, which is much needed. Rather, the U.S. supports the original draft decisions for 19BB as written in COP19 Doc 11 document, and we would also support Israel's suggested amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. We have that. I give the floor to Mexico, followed by China.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. Our delegation would like to thank the scientific committees for their work on this issue. We have had the possibility of participating in the working group during the 74th SC meeting, and we therefore agree with the draft decisions with the Secretariat amendments, with the exception of the elimination of paragraph B of the 19BB decision, as the United States has also just said, and we request to keep that because we believe that the method to prioritize species can be worked in parallel to the review that some of them will go under, and is important to continue the process in order to improve the methodology according to what has been agreed by the scientific committees and the Standing Committee. Additionally, we welcome the initiative by the Secretariat to start with the revision of 10 species, and we would like them to share the criteria they have used to select them. The objective to review this methodology is to analyze species within the 4 priorities in order to document the effects of any CITES decision and to validate general criteria that could be applied for these 4 priorities. We understand that the species that should be chosen should correspond to the most representative values of these priorities and have enough information to carry out those reviews. Mexico did carry an analysis in that regard, which we would gladly share with the Secretariat and the parties. And the 10 species, according to our analysis, would be another one, Panthera leo, Amazona finche, Manis gigantea, Eritacus, and many other. We have observed that the species of this analysis have already got a lot of previous work, and therefore we also agree with the comments made by the United States and the additions by Israel on the effects of legal and illegal trade. Thank you.
Thank you. Mexico, I give the floor to China, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. China is grateful to the Animals and Plants Committee for their report and the discussions. And we have learned from the document and the Secretary's comments after the AC31, PC25 about the progress of this work. We have seen the list of 10 species proposed by the Secretariat. Well, we do not know exactly what the criteria were used for the selection of this species. We also express our support since the Secretariat has begun its work since SC74. Even after analysis the cases of these 10 species, it is still difficult to truly understand the CITES actions and make sound recommendations. In this regard, China supports the original draft decision submitted by the Animals and Plants Committee in Annex 1 to CoP19 Doc 11 and does not support amendments proposed by the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. I now give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the European Union and its member states, we appreciate that the Secretariat provided this review even under a situation when the cooperation with the relevant university could not continue. We are opening to discussing the proposed process and we would like to suggest two minor amendments. So under paragraph 19AA, we would like to insert and relevant experts after range states so that the consultations are carried out with range states and relevant experts. And in paragraph 19BB, small b, if it's retained, which was proposed by several parties, we would like to suggest that it may be useful to also identify such measures adopted or to be adopted by the conference of parties that benefit the specific species. So to add some minor text at the end which would call for identification of such measures. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union, but I'm not sure we quite got your specific text on 19BB subparagraph B. I think you were going to suggest the words and we haven't quite, I haven't quite understood what you're suggesting there.
Well, the text of the decision 19BB small b says refers to in the last line refers to assessment of species listed in Appendix 1 that might benefit from measures adopted by the conference of parties. And we feel that it's unclear what measures these could be, so we suggest that information is collected, or that examples are collected, or these measures are identified to make clear what they refer to. But this is a minor edit, so we'll leave it to you whether to take it on board.
Okay, thank you, European Union, and perhaps this is an issue that the two committees could resolve in their discussions. But I'll give the floor to the Secretariat to comment on some of the earlier suggested changes.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. The Secretariat would just like to come back in on the suggestion from Israel about the reference to at least 10 Appendix 1 listed species from the table in paragraph 15 of this document. I just wanted to explain that if you were to retain that language, there's no need to say at least 10 because the table has 10. species, but just to explain that for the very reason that Mexico has just pointed out, that there may be additional case studies out there that we could also use. That's why we were saying at least. So the 10 species in this table are the ones that were selected in consultation with these students. They were selected using this methodology, this quadrant that Mexico had proposed. So we tried to take species from each of the 4 quadrants in the methodology that's explained in, I think it's in SC 74. But it was also a selection across animals and plants, so different taxa and that, and it was also whatever the students were interested in. But this is our baseline, and we do hope that we will be in a position, we have these 10 completed, I should say, so we hope that we may be able to collect some additional cases for the Animals and Plants Committees to review. So our suggestion is to retain the language that was there already, which was to say at least 10 species, recognizing that our intention is to seek additional cases above and beyond the 10 that are identified in that table. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Israel, you have the floor to respond if you wish.
Yes, thank you, Secretary, for that clarification. We're glad to hear that these have basically been done and that there is intention to do others. So we could simply add the word "the" required for at least the 10 Appendix 1 listed species, and that would include the fact that we're dealing with the 10 listed in. So we would retain my correction for it would be required for at least the 10 Appendix 1 listed species in paragraph 15, comma, and others. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. So just clarifying the final text. So in 19AA, I think 19AA subparagraph A, we have the amendments proposed by Israel, which were supported by the US, and with the subsequent amendments following the discussion with the Secretariat that we just had. Then in 19AA subparagraph B, there was the support for the Secretariat amendments. Continuing into 19BB, there was no support for the suggested deletion by the Secretariat of subparagraph B or of the other amendments, if I heard correctly. So with that, I think we can conclude this document with the suggested amendments and propose this draft decisions as a recommendation from this committee to the plenary. In doing so, I think we have to delete 2 decisions which are in effect now being superseded by these decisions. So that is 18.28 and 18.29. So those decisions are recommended for deletion. Oh, sorry, European Union, you have the floor.
I'm sorry, Chair, I did not hear any opposition to our first suggestion in para 19AA small a to add after in consultation with relevant range states also the reference to the relevant experts. So I hope you can take this on board. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, European Union, I do have that written down. And we have captured it, but yes, you are right to draw it to our attention because I didn't specify it. So, right, if you just give me a second. Thank you, colleagues. So we now move on to the next document on our agenda, which is document 43.1 on non-detriment findings, and we have a report of the Animals and Plants Committee. And I invite one of the chairs, the chair of the Animals Committee, to introduce that for us. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. At CoP18, parties adopted decisions 18132 to 18134 on non-determinant findings. They were directed to the Secretariat, the Animals and Plants Committees, as well as to the parties. The decisions direct the Secretariat to inventory and review existing NDF guidance material, identify any gaps or needs, identify in consultation with the Animals and Plants Committee as well as parties priorities for additional or improved NDF guidance materials and for addressing the identified gaps and needs. It should then address these agreed priorities by undertaking research to develop new or improved guidance and organize one or more interdisciplinary workshops on NDFs where new or existing NDF guidance materials are to be reviewed, advanced or completed. The Animals Committee and Plants Committee shall review the Secretariat's gap analysis and assist in identifying priorities, participate in workshops, assist the Secretariat in preparing the workshops, and review and make recommendations on the outcomes of these workshops and report to the COP on all these matters. Before AC31, PC25, the joint meeting of the two committees, and in line with decision 18134, the Secretariat consulted parties on suggestions made in the gap analysis presented in document AC31, Doc 14.1, PC25, Doc 17, and sought their suggestions about priorities and or additional or improved NDF guidance materials and about the best way to address apparent gaps or needs. The Animals and Plants Committees were consulted through their respective chairs. The Secretariat also suggested the establishment of a technical advisory group, TAG, to support the Secretariat in this project. At the joint meeting AC31 PC25, the two committees agreed to recommend to establish an ad hoc technical advisory body to advise the Secretariat on the implementation of decision 18132. They also recommended that the chairs of the Animals and Plants Committees will advise the Secretariat on the modalities, terms of reference, and timing of the establishment of the ad hoc technical advisory body. And also that the additional priorities and work streams suggested in document AC31 PC25 COM3, as well as the proposed prioritization be considered when establishing final priorities and work streams. And finally, to submit draft decision on non-determinant finding guidance to CoP19. These draft decisions are available in Annex 1 to the present document. During the ACPC meetings, Germany generously announced that it will make substantial funding available to enable to work under these decisions. Additional funding was provided by the European Union and Switzerland. The TAG convened on 14th January 2022 for its inaugural session online to formulate advice on the contents and methods of work streams to address gaps and weaknesses in NDF guidance materials. The agreed methods and content of work streams are contained in Annex 3 and 4 to the present document. The TAG also gave advice on the criteria for selecting workstream expert groups to address each of the defined work streams. So in conclusion, the Conference of the Parties is invited to note the progress in developing new or updated NDF guidance, including the establishment of the Technical Advisory Group TAG for this exercise, and adopt draft decision 19AA to 19CC contained in Annex 1 to the present document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee, and I open the floor for comments by parties. I see Canada, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. Canada would like to thank the Secretariat for the work they did during the intersessional period to prepare the inventory and gap analysis, and to thank the Animals and Plants Committees for the subsequent work they did, including to establish the Technical Advisory Group, or TAG. Canada also supports the finalized set of work streams set out by the TAG and the process that will be followed to implement individual work streams through the establishment of the workstream expert groups. Canada is not a member of the TAG and would appreciate information on TAG membership, as this was not indicated in document 43.1. And we would also appreciate greater clarity on how the TAG and the workstream expert groups will seek input from parties, and how parties can contact the TAG should they have information or materials relevant to a particular work stream. And finally, Canada notes that the proposed decisions in Annex 1 could be updated to be forward-looking by referencing decisions agreed here at CoP19 rather than referencing the COP18 decisions. The COP18 decisions could then be deleted. To this end, Canada has proposed changes to the COP19 decisions. The amendments would delete references to the COP18 decisions and bring the substance of those decisions into the new decisions. Chair, we provided you with a text of our suggested amendment, and if you so advise, I could read out the changes now. Okay. There are 3 changes. The first one is in 19.AA, little I, and I'll just read out. Continuing to support the TAG through which the Animals and Plants Committees provide support and advice for implementation. The next change, also in 19AA, little Roman numeral 3, would read, undertaking targeted research in support of the development of new or updated NDF guidance materials in close collaboration with the TAG, relevant experts, parties, and organizations to address the agreed work streams building on the inventory and gap analysis of existing guidance prepared by the Secretariat. The last change would be in 19.BB, little a, and it would read, continue the TAG established under the recommendations in document AC31/PC25, COM3, for which the Animals and Plants Committees provide support and advice for implementation, and make any appropriate decisions to ensure continued advice and assistance for the implementation of decisions 19.AA through 19CC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada, for those amendments which we've captured. I now give the floor to the European Union, followed by the United Kingdom.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and its member states would like to thank the Animals and Plants Committees and the Secretariat for preparation of this document and the presentation of this important matter. Non-detriment findings are central to the Convention, and they are the only existing instrument that show that legal International trade in wild fauna and flora listed in CITES is sustainable and does not threaten its survival. The European Union and its member states has been working for a long time on NDFs to support scientific authorities in making non-detriment findings and to improve their quality. Bearing in mind the importance of the NDFs within CITES, we support the draft decision presented in document 43.1. In addition, we would like to encourage active participation by all parties in the making of NDFs and the preparation of guidance and materials. We also support the amendments that have been proposed by Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. And I'll give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by Mexico.
Thank you, Chair. The United Kingdom supports the draft decisions in Annex 1 and supports the amendments provided by Canada. UK CITES scientific authorities have extensive experience in conducting non-detriment findings and support the collaboration and cooperation in better making consistent, robust and adaptive NDFs and work streams that result in guidance that helps to enable this. In this regard, the UK will shortly be presenting document 43.2 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I give the floor to Mexico, followed by China.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mexico also supports the draft decisions 19AA through to 19CC of Annex 1 in the document for the organization of the next workshop on NDFs. We think these are priority lines of work to implement decisions 18132 through to 18134 in the follow-up of the first workshop that was held in 2008 in Mexico. We also support the amendment suggestions made by Canada, and we invite parties to review the information document 92, where we were pleased to provide the information guide for the making of NDFs for the sustainable use of Candelilla within the framework of CITES provisions. This guide, which was developed by the Scientific Authority of CITES in Mexico with experts, technical professionals and others, was a support tool to help the forestry technicians and users on how to ensure sustainable use of Candelilla and to work with all the productive chain to ensure that there's a national implementation of CITES. It provides information on the sustainability and use to act as a base for the making of NDFs in accordance with decisions 18134 on NDFs and 18139. This is available to download in Spanish through our scientific authority, and it can be seen in information document 92. These are specific examples of where we want to move towards with this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. And I give the floor now to China, followed by Israel.
Thank you, Chair. China contributes experts to the technical advisory group and supports the adoption of the draft decision 19.AA to 19.CC with amendment proposed by Canada. China welcomes the proposed second international expert workshop on nationally on the NDF or more activities as a follow-up to the first workshop held in Cancun, Mexico in 2008. Next year, China will launch the talent exchange program for scientific authorities for CITES to support the parties in carrying out NDF case studies and guidance. We sincerely hope to provide more support to parties in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China, and I give the floor to Israel.
Thank you, Chair. We too support the amendments as proposed by Canada, and we would also propose a small amendments to Annex 2, which discusses or lists the membership of the TAG. In Annex 2, under Little Roman numeral 4, we would like to make a slight change to that. After the word 10 additional parties that are members or alternate members of the Standing Committee, during the intercessional period between COP19 and COP20, as this will take us forward. Again, it would be members or alternate members of the Standing Committee during the intercessional cycle between COP19 and COP20 as a way to update the TAG. We too are looking forward to the second NDF workshop. We took part in the first one almost 15 years ago in Cancun, Mexico, and it's certainly high time for a second one. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel, and I give the floor now to the Congo.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Republic of Congo very much appreciates this work by the Plants Committee and the Animals Committee, as well as the Technical Advisory Group on this important issue of providing guidance and materials to parties on making NDFs. We support the recommendations in the document, including all the draft decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, the Congo. I give the floor now to Cameroon, followed by Mali.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Cameroon has looked at this document and think it's important to mention the experience we have on the making of NDFs. And given how complex the subject is and the difficulties and challenges that many encounter in making NDFs, we think that this is very useful and we support the work, and it will assist countries in achieving harmonization in the making of NDFs. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor now to Mali, followed by Guinea.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good morning, Chair. I wanted to greet you. We've all slept well and we're starting a good day. So, thank you. Mali supports the proposal on the adoption of the draft decisions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mali. I give the floor now to Guinea.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Guinea would like to congratulate the Animals and Plants Committee on their work, and we support the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea. Just one moment, please. I'll see if there's any observers who might want to take the floor briefly. Okay. Okay, I'll give the floor to Sprep, followed by Traffic.
Thanks, Chair. The Secretariat for the Pacific Environment Program has been supporting Pacific parties with work on NDFs through experts and with funding from the Pacific European Union Marine Program. We support the ongoing work by the Secretariat to improve NDF resources for parties, especially through the work of the Technical Advisory Group. We also support consideration of the use of traditional knowledge in the development of NDFs by the TAG in one of its work streams, and suggest this could also be a theme in the proposed international expert workshop on non-detriment findings. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sprep. I give the floor now to Traffic.
Thank you, Chair. Traffic welcomes the thorough review undertaken by the Secretariat of existing NDF guidance and tools, including the 9-step guidance for plants and guidance for sharks that Traffic has developed with Japanese BFN. At this COP, we have heard from many parties requesting capacity building for NDFs for species such as timber species, sharks, and sea cucumbers, and requesting delayed implementation periods to accommodate such work to occur. Following the listing of 3 species of sea cucumber at COP18 with a delayed implementation period, Traffic assisted a number of parties in the Oceania region with developing NDFs, as we heard from Papua New Guinea during the discussion of Proposal 42. This assistance was made possible with EU funding through SPREP. It is critical to support parties with NDF development, and guidance will need to be adapted for different taxa and levels of data availability. We hope that the life forms in new taxa listings adopted at this meeting are also considered in the work stream of the NDF project to ensure that these listings are effective. Traffic supports the proposed draft decisions, which plot the way forward for the Technical Advisory Group that will progress this fundamental work and directs the Secretariat to organize a second international expert workshop on non-detriment findings. Traffic is pleased to be member of the TAG and stands ready to continue to support parties with development of capacity building on NDFs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Traffic. I give the floor to, is that Blue Resources Trust? And I will close the list for observers then. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of Blue Resources Trust and WCS. To keep this brief, we take this opportunity to highlight the release of the new electronic NDF software developed with the support of the government of Germany to support the development of shark and ray NDFs. The software is free and open to all parties. We encourage parties to contact our delegation or send us an email to get access. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, colleagues, and sorry for the delay. Clearly, I've heard lots of support for the draft decisions in Annex 1 and the amendments proposed by Canada. So I think there's lots of support, as I said, for these decisions to go forward. And I think with Canada's amendments, then we can delete decisions 18.132 to 18.134. We note your comments, Israel, on Annex 2. Of course, we're not adopting Annex 2 at this meeting. Annex 2 is presented here sort of for information as a record of what took place, really, rather than an item that is intended to go forward. And we also note Canada's comment or request to hear more about the TAG membership, and the Secretariat will make that available subsequently so that it is available to parties and observers. So with that, I would look to conclude this item. We are recommending for adoption the draft decisions in Annex 1 as amended by Canada, and we are deleting decisions 18.132 to 18.134. We can now move on to document 43.2, which is about non-detriment findings, making non-detriment findings for specimens of Appendix 2 species taken in the marine environment not under the jurisdiction of any state. The proponent is the United Kingdom, so I offer the floor to the UK to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. The UK is pleased to put forward this document, which seeks to address the challenges faced by parties when preparing non-detriment findings for aquatic species taken in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Many commercially exploited aquatic organisms, such as sharks, are taken in fisheries on the high seas. There are a range of measures in place by regional fisheries management organisations that apply to CITES Appendix 2 listed species. However, there are also many gaps in species-specific and geographical coverage of these measures. The UK notes Resolution 14.6 on introduction from the sea, which recommends that in the case of an export of Appendix 2 specimens, the scientific authority of the state of export, in making its NDF, consult with other national scientific authorities or, when appropriate, international scientific authorities. The Convention, however, provides no guidance on how the consultation with international scientific authorities might take place, nor how total numbers of specimens to be introduced should be determined. While some guidance has been developed by parties with respect to the making of NDFs for shark species, the UK remains concerned about the practicalities around making non-detriment findings for species taken in the high seas by vessels from multiple parties. It's difficult for any scientific authority to make an NDF for CITES-listed species taken on the high seas without having access to relevant information such as stock status and levels of take from illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing and bycatch. To support the development of solutions to these problems, the UK proposes that a technical workshop is convened. We're pleased to provide a financial contribution for the running and delivery of this workshop. At workshops hosted by the German government in 2021 and 2022, participants identified strengths and weaknesses in the current relationship between fisheries and conservation in respect of shark management, while also noting areas of progress where synergies could be improved. The UK welcomes this initiative from Germany to bring together CITES and RFMO officials to coordinate efforts to deliver common objectives for the protection and sustainable management of CITES-listed sharks and rays. These findings, alongside the final workshop planned by Germany, can serve as the basis for the more focused workshop proposed by the UK, bringing relevant stakeholders from fisheries together and taking a closer look into the specific technical issues we've raised. The UK recommends that findings from this workshop are submitted to the Animals Committee and subsequently relayed to the Standing Committee and the 20th Conference of the Parties for consideration. We consider this workshop complementary to the decisions in Document 65 on sharks and rays and the initiative led by the German government. We remain firmly committed to improving implementation and have been pleased to support work which ensures listings are effective and enforceable. This work has been done in collaboration with international partners, working with Indonesian colleagues and experts to develop identification guides for all listed shark and ray species. With the likely significant increase in the number of aquatic listings adopted at this COP, effective implementation is more important than ever. We therefore hope the work and technical workshop proposed in this document provides clarity and support for improved coordination between parties and relevant organisations in making NDFs. Finally, we thank the Secretariat for their suggestions on the proposal and are happy to accept their suggested amendments as outlined within the document. We would therefore welcome parties to adopt these decisions which seek to improve coordination of multi-party NDFs for straddling stocks caught in the high seas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom, for your introduction, and I note that you are happy with the proposed Secretariat amendments to your suggested draft decisions. So with that, I will open the floor for any comments by parties. I see none at present, and I'm going to take that as indicating support. I see parties appearing now. I see the European Union, followed by the United States.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and its member states would like to thank the United Kingdom this issue and having drafted this document. The making of NDFs for specimens species shared between several countries and captured in the high seas is still a threat. This initiative is aligned to two other initiatives in order to strengthen synergies in fishing between CITES and the protections of species fished in high seas. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor now to the United States, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Chair. The United States shares the view that building capacity to make robust NDFs for marine species based on the best available science is key to improving the efforts parties are already making towards the implementation of Appendix 2 listings and ensuring that such actions lead to both biologically sustainable and legal trade. We are concerned, however, about convening a separate technical workshop to consider non-detriment findings for the introduction from the sea of CITES Appendix 2 species taken by multiple parties in waters beyond national jurisdiction at this time. As the Secretariat notes in its comments on the document, the NDF workshop being planned for 2023 already includes a work stream on NDFs for marine or aquatic species, including regional implications for shared species, introduction from the sea, and NDFs for marine or aquatic invertebrates. We agree that the work stream and the outcomes from that workshop will cover a subset of the work proposed in Draft Decision 19AA, and we also take note of the German workshops that the UK referenced in its introduction. We are cognizant of parties and the Secretariat's limited resources and are concerned about the number of workshops being planned. However, we could accept the Secretariat's edits to this document. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I give the floor to Japan, followed by New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Japan believes that scientific authority of each party should basically be responsible for the issuing the NDFs in accordance with the NDF guideline in Resolution 16.7. Japan thinks that it is impractical for RFMOs and other international fisheries organizations to provide the timely advice on the issuance of the NDF for the commercially exploited aquatic species such as sharks and rays from the introduction from the sea. This would impose an excessive administrative burden on RFMOs and others. Therefore, scientific authority of each party should basically be responsible for the issuing the NDF with available best scientific information and data. In Japan, when considering the issuance of NDF for the CITES Appendix 2 listed the species introduced from the sea, we smoothly use a stock assessment of Japanese Fisheries Institution, stock assessment by the scientific committee of the RFMOs, and information and data on the domestic catch quota and catches, etc. In addition, cooperation of the researcher have been obtained in our stock assessment of aquatic species such as the shark and ray. And NDF have been issued for the species introduced from the high sea without any problem. Japan believes that FAO, RFMOs, and the coastal state should conserve the managed shark and ray resources from the perspective of the sustainable use based on the scientific evidence. The fact that the imposing double regulation by the unnecessarily listing the many sharks and rays in CITES appendices without any scientific basis, thereby impeding the appropriate production, distribution, and trade of the shark and ray and other aquatic species should be improved. Japan does not have a specific comment on the draft decision, but we would like to just show our concern about this matter in this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan, and your concerns are noted. I give the floor now to New Zealand, followed by the Congo.
Thank you, Chair. We agree with the United States that there is need to make sure that there's not overlap between this sort of workshop and the NDF workshop. And as long as they dovetail nicely together, then New Zealand would certainly support holding a technical workshop as proposed by the United Kingdom. And we would suggest the inclusion of Oceania parties dealing with this particular issue, especially perhaps including those parties that have their flagged vessels operating in the high seas. That presents some different issues than where parties' own vessels are operating in the high seas. So as proposed, the workshop should primarily concentrate on take, directed or as bycatch of commercial volumes of specimens on the high seas rather than the small volume and often non-destructive collection of scientific samples. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. I give the floor to the Congo, followed by Peru.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Our country, the Republic of the Congo, recognizes that the NDFs should be, the establishment making of NDFs must be based on legislation in order to protect the species listed in an appendix of CITES. The species taken in the marine environment not under the national jurisdiction according to Conf 14.6 Rev 6 requires a very good collaboration between the scientific authorities and the RFBs and RFMOs and other international organizations. The Republic of Congo supports strongly this document and the recommendations in Annex 1 and the draft decisions in Annex 1. Thank you.
Thank you. The Congo, I give the floor to Peru, followed by Mali.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Peru supports the draft decisions submitted by the United Kingdom and of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which will allow to improve the making of NDFs in this for specimens in the CITES convention, as well as with the support, having the support of the regional fishery bodies will be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. I give the floor now to Mali, and that concludes the list of parties.
Merci bien, Monsieur le.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to take advantage of this situation to thank the parties who have drafted this document. My country supports this proposal with the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Marley. I'll now open the floor for any observers that might wish to comment. So I'll give the floor to IUCN, followed by SPREP.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is given on behalf of IUCN, Traffic and ZSL. We believe that the coordination of parties exploiting and trading migratory aquatic species is essential to ensure that these activities are legal, sustainable and traceable. Species that migrate between countries' marine and inland waters, exclusive economic zones and into areas beyond national jurisdiction are inherently vulnerable to overexploitation and have been evidenced to have poorer reporting and less effective management. This was highlighted for certain shark species in Traffic's missing shark reports and also in the CoP19 Doc 49 on introduction from the sea. As such, we urge parties to improve regional coordination when carrying out NDFs and for other management actions for populations and straddling stocks of migratory species in international trade. All three organisations would be happy to join any relevant workshops to provide expertise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. I give the floor now to SPREP.
Thanks, Chair. SPREP strongly supports this proposal by the UK to convene a technical workshop to consider how non-detriment findings might best be achieved for the high seas or areas beyond national jurisdiction. RFMOs are already undertaking stock assessments for regional stocks of sharks such as mako, and it makes sense to discuss with RFMOs how this information can contribute to effective NDFs for these migratory species. Thanks, Chair.
I'll give the floor to two more observers. I think OP's Oceania Foundation, then HSI.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of Opus Oceani Foundation. Clearly, the UK has made this proposal in good faith and it addresses a real problem. But we note that the identification by CITES of what constitutes an international scientific authority might be open to manipulation, especially if it were to make some less qualified authorities the equals of the truly qualified and relevant authorities. Opus Oceani Foundation also notes that we have not yet solved the problem of completing NDFs within national jurisdictions, especially when it comes to sharks. And on the high seas, we are mostly dealing with migratory species, which adds another level of complexity to the problem. So we urge caution in progressing this matter and in terms of its ambitions, but we are not opposed to more discussion and to a workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Opus Oceania Foundation. I've only got two further observers requesting the floor, so I'll give the floor to both, but ask you both to be brief, please. So, Humane Society International, followed by IWMC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm making this intervention also on behalf of Species Survival Network. We recommend that COP19 should adopt these decisions, but we agree with the previous speaker on the issue of an international scientific authority, and we would like to see the addition of an express mandate directing the workshop to propose a definition for the term international scientific authorities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, HSI. I give the floor IWMC, and that's the end of the list of observers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak on behalf of IWMC and several other organizations, the names of which will be provided to the Secretariat. Non-detriment findings of marine species are indeed a complex issue, which CITES has thus far failed to address properly. In order to maintain or improve the conservation status of these species and the sustainable use, close collaboration with scientific authorities of other bodies, such as RFMOs or NGOs, is crucial. That said, in line with the provisions of the Convention and what Japan has said, the issuance of NDFs for Appendix 2 listed marine species should still rest with the national scientific authorities. But in order to maintain and improve the conservation status, as well as the wise use of these species, information exchange and exchange of expertise is crucial. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, IWMC. So having heard the various interventions, there seems to be support for the draft decisions proposed by the United Kingdom as amended by the Secretariat. I have heard various concerns or reservations expressed to avoid duplication with the wider NDF workshop being proposed, and of course I heard from the US that they're concerned about additional workshops, but they didn't feel the need to block this, and we've also heard the comments from Japan and others as well. So I conclude with that we adopt for this item, or we recommend for adoption from this item, the draft decisions in this document as amended by the Secretariat. And I think that concludes discussion on this particular item. Thank you for your contributions to the debate. And we now move on. In the agenda, we are meant now to move to 44.1 and 44.2. However, I understand there is a clash in terms of speakers between what's happening here and what's happening in Committee 2. So if colleagues are willing and have the right people available, it would help if we could jump an agenda item and move on to stony corals, item 46, which is a document submitted by the European Union and its member states. So I look to the European Union to ask if you are able to perhaps introduce this now. You are? Okay, you have the floor. Thank you.
Momento.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. In document 46, the European Union has signaled to the Conference of the Parties several issues concerning the trade of stony corals, which we understand must be analyzed more deeply. Resolution 11, Conference 1110 from Rev CoP19 has given definitions for the types of coral, including coral sand, fragments, coral rock, live rock, and substrate. There's still confusion on which coral are subject to the Convention provisions. Although some parties are talking about trade in substrates, some understand that it's been fossilized and therefore is not subject to CITES provisions. The document already warns on the lack of guidelines for the identification of corals, and in particular the stony corals, and it also suggests that we explain better the definition Scaratinia as a trade of different species can be done under the order Scleractinia. The analysis also points out other issues in the trade of corals. Although it shouldn't be possible to inform on the trade of live coral specimens on the Scleractinia order, more than 100,000 live corals were declared as such in the period 2016-2020, according to exporters. If we consider the trade declared by exporters, then the volume goes up to 1.6 million live corals in the same period. It is very probable that all this trade was of coral rock and wrongly declared. There seems to be similar mistakes in the trade of 1.1 million kilos of Scleractinia declared by the exporters as live coral, and therefore the European Union has made a number of suggestions which we would like to request the Plants Committee to review according to Resolution Conference 1110 Rev CoP15, and to the Plants Committee and to the Standing Committee to draft recommendations on the guidelines for the presentation of annual reports in order to be more clear with them. We take note of the Secretariat's suggestions, and we support fully all amendments. The European Union will also present a guideline of identification at the Plants Committee, as the Secretariat has suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, and I hear that you support the suggested amendments to your decisions as made by the Secretariat. And I think I heard of the translation, the Plants Committee, referred to a few times. I think it is, of course, the Animals Committee that we are dealing with here.
Sorry, Chair, yes, animals.
Comments by parties. So I see the Maldives followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. Maldives thanks EU and its member states for this document. Maldives is a coral reef nation where we generate numerous benefits from the coral reef and other associated coastal ecosystems. The formation of our islands are also dependent on these coral reefs. While we have taken stringent measures nationally to protect corals, including banning of export, there are still illegal cases of export of corals from the Maldives. In addition to this, the Maldives also has an import market for corals and derivatives of corals where we need to keep track of importation and improve the capacity within the implementing agencies, including the customs authorities. Therefore, we have comments regarding the changes to the definitions proposed in this document 46. Maldives has concerns regarding the trade of dead corals, which is the most common form of coral trade in the Maldives. As such, we need to find acceptable means to regulate trade in recently dead whole specimens or colonies of corals whose corallites are intact and identifiable to genus or species level. For coral rock, live rock, and fossil corals, all of these need to be recognized as dead corals, whether covered by calcareous algae and other organisms which are used in the aquarium trade for use as base materials. We believe the confusion on reporting is partly due to the inconsistencies arising from live rock versus live corals. Therefore, we should avoid the use of the term live rock. Perhaps the solution is to have a simple categories like live corals identifiable to species level, recently dead coral colonies identifiable to species level with identifiable growth parts such as corallites and other morphological features intact. We are not suggesting amendments to the working definitions in Annex 1 at this stage, but we would like to suggest that the Animals Committee, when they review the suggested amendments to the definitions of stony corals in Resolution Conf 1110, Rev COP 15, as outlined in Annex 1, to do so by consulting with coral reef nations or coral experts from coral reef nations and report with recommendations to the Standing Committee. Therefore, in 19AA, small a, we are suggesting that after provide advice on possible amendments to add in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, and then continue. Maldives also recognizes that there is merit in discussing further the definition of coral rock, and Maldives remains committed and keen to work with parties and range countries and consumer states to collaborate further on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
So can we just, to make sure we've got your suggested insertion and captured correctly, can you just repeat it one more time and indicate exactly where you wish it to be inserted, noting that the European Union have accepted the Secretariat amendment, so maybe that's the part of the document to be working from at the moment. But if you could just repeat your suggested insertions, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, our amendments are also to the suggestions by the Secretariat. In the decisions directed to the Animals Committee in 19AA, little a, so it continues as taking into account document, and the place where it says provide advice on possible amendments in the second line. After that, we are proposing to include in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, and then it continues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maldives. We've captured that now. Thank you very much. I give the floor now to the United Kingdom, followed by the United States.
Thank you, Chair. The UK thanks the European Union for submitting this document and recognises the issues and challenges identified for trade in coral rock. We would also like to thank the EU for their work in developing an identification guide to help mitigate some of these challenges. In this vein, we would like to draw parties' attention to the work the UK has been doing in partnership with Indonesia to develop a visual identification guide to aid inspection of corals in trade along the supply chain. The UK is supportive of the draft decisions presented in Document 46. We especially welcome advice to be provided by the Animals Committee on the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10 Rev COP 15. We also welcome the opportunity to discuss the proposed changes to definitions at the Animals Committee, as we consider there are some areas that warrant additional clarification. We note that it is important that any changes in definitions support clear interpretation for industry. We therefore support the suggested amendment from the Maldives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. United Kingdom. I give the floor to the United States, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. The United States thanks the European Union for the submission of this document and supports the proposed amendments to definitions of stony corals outlined in Annex 1 of this document as amended by the Secretariat. From our perspective, the European Union's suggested revisions are a practical approach. The United States is also supportive of the recommendation in Decision 19AA(b), as it would be useful for the Animals Committee to review any identification guides that may assist in the successful implementation of trade in stony corals and to provide advice as needed. And in addition, we support the proposed amendments from the Maldives. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I go now to Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia would like to thank to EU and its member states for submitting the document. Indonesia agrees with the draft decision addressed to Standing Committee and Animals Committee regarding the definition of live corals. To avoid ambiguity, a more precise size range should be made for the term live rock and substrate in the draft resolution in Annex 1 of document CoP19 Doc 46. Indonesia suggests changing the term substrate to the piece of coral rock less than 1 kilogram each. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. I'll see if there are any observers that wish to take the floor. I'll give the floor to UNEP WCMC, followed by OFI.
Thank you, Chair. UNEP WCMC supports Document 46 and the decisions as amended by the Secretariat. Analysing trade patterns for coral rock is particularly difficult on account of the reporting issues outlined in the document, and further clarity on the terms in trade is needed within the guidelines for the preparation and submission of annual reports. In analysing trade in corals for processes such as the review of significant trade, we use conversion factors to convert trade reported in pieces to kilograms or vice versa in order to get an overall picture of trade in live corals or coral rock that were reported by parties under different terms of measure. These conversion factors were developed back in 1999 and could also be worthy of some further review by the Animals Committee at the same time as considering the other issues on coral rock as outlined in Document 46. We would therefore recommend adding an addition to Decision 19AA directed to the Animals Committee, which I've slightly amended in line with the interventions from the Maldives. So it would read 19AA c, in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, provide advice on the conversion factors used to analyse trade in corals for the CITES review of significant trade process and report to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So any suggested changes to the methodology could then be taken on board for the review of significant trade selection process following COP20. Let me know if you'd like me to read that again, Chair.
Yes, please.
So the decision would be 19AA c, in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, provide advice on the conversion factors used to analyse trade in corals for the CITES review of significant trade process and report to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WCMC. I'll come back to that in a minute, but I'll give the floor to OFI.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also speaking on behalf of Ornamental Aquatic Trade Association, WATA, and the European Pet Organization, EPO. This document and discussions highlight that parties have very different interpretation of what is or is not fossilized coral. This being further complicated by the many alternative production methods for live rock in trade. This results in inconsistent application of the convention and affects any statistics produced. This lack of clarity could result in the term fossil coral being used on shipments and may risk overexploitation. We urge parties to agree on a common interpretation of fossil coral and hereby signal our interest and willingness to participate in any work seeking to find a workable solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, OFI, and for your comments. I note that WCMC have proposed a suggested amendment to the decisions, and I just wonder if there are any parties that might wish to support that. Okay, I now see three parties, so I saw New Zealand first. You have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I support UNEP WCMC's suggestions, which was built on the Maldives proposal earlier. Thanks.
Thank you. And I see both the United Kingdom and the United States. Are you both intending to support as well? In which case, I will take that as indicating support from parties. So with that, and beginning with the draft decisions proposed by the European Union as amended by the Secretariat and then subsequently by the Maldives, with the addition from UNEP WCMC as supported by a number of parties, I think we can move to recommend the adoption of these draft decisions. So with that, we can close discussion on this agenda item, and I'll just check how progress is going in Committee 2. Right, so I think Committee 2 discussions are resolved, and we can now go back to document 44.1, which is a review of Resolution Conference 1119 on the Identification Manual. This document is submitted by the Standing Committee, and I understand that Canada are going to introduce that. Is that correct? Oh no, Switzerland, you're asking for the floor. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I present this document on behalf of the Standing Committee as Animals Committee Chair. At the 18th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, decisions 18135 to 18139 on identification materials were adopted. At its 74th meeting in the Standing Committee, considered document SC74, Docs 46 on identification materials prepared by the Secretariat in consultation with the Animals and Plants Committees. The Standing Committee agreed to submit to the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties the draft resolution on materials for the identification of specimens of CITES-listed species contained in Annex 1 to the present document. The draft resolution will replace Resolution Conf 11.19 Ref CoP 16 on identification manual and was developed based on the review of Resolution Conf 11.19 Ref CoP 16 carried out by the Joint Working Group on Identification Materials established by the Animals and Plants Committees, working in collaboration with the Secretariat. The Standing Committee further agreed to submit 2 alternative sets of draft decisions for the consideration of the Conference of the Parties for the continuation of work on ID materials. The first set of draft decisions would be proposed for adoption should the COP agree to adopt the new resolution. The second would be proposed in the case where the COP decided not to adopt the new proposed resolution. The draft decisions are set out in Annex 2 and 3 to the present document. In paragraph 6, a range of other activities conducted by the Secretariat in relation to identification materials are listed. The Conference of the Parties is therefore invited to adopt the draft resolution on materials for the identification of specimens of CITES-listed species as contained in Annex 1, and adopt draft decisions contained in Annex 2, subject to the adoption of the new draft resolution, and delete decisions 18135 to 18139 as they have been implemented. And Chair, with your indulgence, I would like to give the floor now to the United States, who chaired the working group from the side of the Animals Committee.
Yes, of course, United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As co-chair representing the Plants Committee on the Identification Materials Working Group, I am also pleased to present the results of the joint intersessional work of the Animals and Plants Committee as found in document CoP19 Doc 44.1. Annex 1 to this document puts before the parties a revised resolution on materials for the identification of specimens of CITES-listed species to replace Resolution Conf 11.19 Rev CoP 16 on identification manual, and provides guidance on the development of identification materials for CITES-listed species that focuses on the unique identification needs to support implementation of CITES and takes into consideration the many advances on identification that have become available since our 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties in 2013. We also appreciate and support the amendments suggested by the Secretariat to improve the resolution. The draft decisions in Annex 2 of document COP19, document 84.1, will carry us forward elements of the decision 18.137 directed to the Animals and Plants Committees at the 18th meeting of the Conference of the Parties that have yet to be completed. Although the task of reviewing and updating identification materials has been incorporated into the newly revised draft resolution presented in Annex 1, the Plants and Animals Committees have yet to actively undertake this work as called for in Decision 18.137. These decisions were developed and recommended by the AC and PC and further endorsed and recommended by the Standing Committee to ensure this important work is prioritized and continues during the next intersessional period in a focused manner. This suite of decisions will not duplicate other work, but it will complement efforts to improve access to and address gaps in identification material for CITES-listed species, a very important tool for CITES parties in their implementation. Lastly, and as speaking as the United States, we hope that our fellow parties will join us in supporting adoption of the new resolution in Annex 1, as amended by the Secretariat, and the draft decisions in Annex 2 to continue this important work. To close, with the Chair's indulgence, I would like to give the floor and my thanks to the Animals Committee co-chair of this working group, Mr. Hugh Robinson of New Zealand, if he could speak. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes, of course. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, technology's moved a long way since the Identification Manual Resolution 11.19 was adopted at COP 11 in Kenya in the year 2000, and even since the last revision at COP 16 in Bangkok in 2013. New Zealand had the honour to co-chair the Joint Animals Committee, Plants Committee Working Group on Identification Materials that developed the first draft of the resolution contained in Doc 44.1. This new resolution aims to be more responsive to technological advances, but yet maintain the importance of producing identification materials that scientific authorities, management authorities and border enforcement officials are able to access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. New Zealand supports efforts to strengthen the development and use of tools and technologies to address illicit trafficking of wildlife and timber, and identification materials are at the heart of this work. There's an increasing need for genetic and isotope techniques to be available for forensic purposes, to identify CITES species and their geographical origins, and to trace products of CITES species from point of capture through to the consumer markets, often being traded in a processed form where traditional identification methods are not readily applicable, for example, in processed shark fins or shark meat. Technologies for presenting identification tools are changing rapidly. However, identification materials must be made available in a variety of formats that suit local conditions. We must not assume that CITES authorities and border officials always have ready access to the internet. In the Oceania region that I represent, the Hunga Hunga Ha'apai submarine volcanic eruption and consequential tsunami that devastated Tonga in January this year cut the cable providing internet services to the whole nation for over 5 weeks. How many of us or our children could cope in that situation? If agreed at this meeting, this new resolution will replace Resolution COP 11.19. New Zealand agrees with the United States that the Secretariat's 2 proposed wording changes on page 3 of Doc 44.1 concerning the draft resolution are accepted. I also agree with my co-chair from the United States that even if the revised resolution is adopted at this meeting, further work, as outlined in Annex 2, is still required. The scientific committees, in particular, are instructed to continue to do the work from the former decision 18.137 that was not adequately addressed in the highly disrupted intersessional period just completed. New Zealand supports the adoption of the new resolution contained in Annex 1, with the 2 minor edits suggested by the Secretariat, and also supports the draft decisions contained in Annex 2. Thank you.
I thank everyone for their comprehensive introduction to this agenda item, and thank the 2 working group co-chairs for their work in bringing this to a conclusion through the Standing Committee. With that, I open the floor to parties, noting that United States and New Zealand both supported the Secretariat amendments to the resolution, but I open the floor to comments from parties for any observations other countries may have. So I give the floor to Mali, followed by Indonesia.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to thank and congratulate further the Standing Committee for the work that has been undertaken, and we support the document. Thank you.
And in supporting the document, clearly parties need to make clear whether they're supporting the proposed resolution and draft decisions, or if they don't, would they be content with Annex 3 and the draft decisions there. But yes, if parties could be clear in their interventions, but I think we understand your meaning, Mali. Thank you. I give the floor now to Indonesia, followed by China.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia supports this resolution, but at the point in the annex to the resolution's main elements, there is a verifiable methods for distinguishing wild from non-wild specimens. This cannot be fully implemented, so we propose to drop those elements. Thank you.
Could you just to help me, could you just be specific? You're talking about the annex to the resolution, and what items do you wish to delete or amend?
There is items, verifiable methods for distinguishing wild from non-wild specimens. So we propose to drop those elements. It is on the annex to the resolution main elements.
Thank you, Indonesia. I found it now. So you propose deletion. So we've captured that, and I give the floor now to China, followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. China thanks to the work of the parties, the Animals and Plants Committee, the Standing Committee, and the Secretariat. We acknowledge the sufficient progress made. We support the new resolution in Annex 1, which will promote the development, dissemination, and the use of identification materials. China supports the Secretariat's one minor edit to the draft resolution, but we do not agree with adding rules of trade to the main element of the ID material in the annex to the resolution, which would pose challenges or even hinders for parties to develop and use of the guide. The draft decisions in Annex 2 have our support. China will continue to actively participate in developing and translating ID material. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, China. I think we've noted that suggested change. So I give the floor to the United States, followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States wishes to object to the suggested amendment to delete the words wild and non-wild. We think an important part and a helpful tool for parties in identification is for them to be able to distinguish wild from non-wild. This is particularly true of plant species, where many times the artificially propagated plant looks much different from the wild. So, we think it was meant there to be useful. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, United States. So we note that difference of opinion there. I give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. Proper identification of species is crucial to the effective implementation of the Convention, and particularly at the border. At this COP so far, we've heard several examples of the difficulties of accurate species identification, especially when using the lookalike criteria. We therefore encourage any efforts to provide materials to parties that can help authorities to identify specimens in trade so that CITES measures can be targeted and proportionate. To that end, we're pleased to have been able to support the recent development of 2 identification guides for marine taxa, developed by the UK's Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science in collaboration with international partners. These 2 identification guides cover sharks and corals. The guides are intended to be practical and user-friendly identification tools, particularly aimed at enforcement authorities at the border. We hope many of you were able to join our side event over the lunch break last Thursday and were able to pick up a copy of the recently finalised Corals and Trade Guide. We support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I give the floor now to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and its member states thanks the Standing Committee for the reviewing of Resolution Conf 1119 and drafting the new resolution on materials for the identification of specimens of CITES listed species and to alternative decision in Annex 2, because we consider the issue very significant and important for effective implementation of the Convention. We recommend to adopt a resolution in Annex 1, which replaces Res. Conf 1119, but we would like to suggest one clarification and two minor amendments. First, in the context of the proposed resolution, the phrase identification of specimens of CITES listed species probably means only taxonomic identification. However, the individual identification of specimens of CITES listed species may also play an important role, for example, in relation to trade in Appendix 1 species. We are not sure whether such cases are covered by this resolution. We would therefore recommend clarifying this and possibly adding a clarification in the preamble, for example, a note that information on individual identification of CITES listed specimens may also be collected. We found one typo in the title of Annex 1, where should be specimens, not specimen, block TS. And we also recommend in the draft resolution, Annex 1, para 4b, line 4, to slightly modify the sentence to allow for the inclusion of trade non-CITES species in the identification materials in case where confusion with CITES protected species is possible. We suggest rewording line 3 to read, where possible, include non-CITES species that are trade and potentially confused with CITES species in this species identification material. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, European Union, I think you're going to have to go through those changes again, one by one and more slowly so that we can capture it. I'm afraid I couldn't keep up. So if you could start with your first suggested change and then move on. But
yeah, first, we would like to add, for example, in the preamble, a note or wording that information on individual identification of CITES listed specimens may also be collected. And the next,
well, one moment.
I will be probably more slowly.
Okay.
Excuse me.
European Union, precisely, you say in the preamble, but exactly where in the preamble do you want to insert it?
I guess when we are dealing with the CITES listed species specimens for the first time, probably it would be logic. Yeah, annex. No. Yeah.
Okay, we're just trying to clarify exactly where this new paragraph would go, and we're assuming that you want to place it at the end of the preamble before it. After the recalling at the bottom of page 5 and before it moves into the operative encourages. Is that correct?
Yes, it's precise.
Thank you. So you can continue, I think, with your next change.
Yeah, that means it is Annex 1, para 4b, and rewarding line 3 to read. And now I will read it more slowly in dictation speed. Where possible, comma, include non-CITES species that are trade and potentially confused with CITES species in these plural species identification materials. Yes. Yes, three, yeah.
So we've got your text, European Union, and we know you want to put it in paragraph 4B, and you said on the third line, but we're not exactly sure where. So perhaps if you could indicate, the words that it is going to be inserted between, that would help us. Thank you.
Here, after comma. After comma, yeah? Yeah. Chair, we propose it to put it on the line 3 just after comma. That means afterward region.
Thank you, EU. We've got that now. So I think we've got the text. If you could then perhaps move on. I think you had another amendment, didn't you? Yes?
Chair, that's all from us, fortunately.
Thank you, European Union. So I give the floor now to New Zealand, followed by Switzerland.
In relation to the last amendment we heard from the EU in paragraph 4B of Annex 1, I think the same effect could be obtained by just simply deleting the words in these from line 3 of para 4B. So it would read in the country or region, and where practicable, include identification materials for commonly traded species, blah, etc. So removing in these would have the same effect, I believe.
We take your point, New Zealand, and maybe the EU, you might want to reflect on whether that would be acceptable to you, but while you're doing that, I will maybe give the floor to Switzerland for any comments.
Thank you, Chair. First, we would like to congratulate the two working groups for their hard work and the excellent results they have been putting before us. Switzerland supports the resolution and the decisions in Annex 2. We would also like to come to the proposed deletion of in the annex to the resolution of the for distinguishing wild from non-wild specimens. In practice, when border control agents are reviewing shipments and they are claimed to be captive bred, it would be quite important and helpful for them to have guidance on how to distinguish wild-taken specimens from captive-bred specimens. That's why I think this is quite a valuable addition to this annex. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. And European Union, have you had the opportunity to consider New Zealand's alternative to your text for paragraph 4B? You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is very acceptable from us. because we always support glasnost. Thanks.
Thank you, European Union. I will see if there are any comments from observers. I don't see any requests from the floor, so if you just give me a second to make sure we've captured all the changes correctly. Right, thank you, folks. So we heard a lot of support for the resolution in Annex 1, and with the Secretariat suggested changes, with the exception of China's comment where they wanted the deletion of reference to and roots. So that is fine, I think. We've had amendments to the draft resolution in Annex 1 proposed by the European Union with amendments suggested by New Zealand, which made the text simpler and clearer. We have a bit of a debate on the contents of the annex, where it's referring to verifiable methods for distinguishing wild from non-wild specimens, which both the United States and Switzerland wanted to retain, and Indonesia wanted to delete. And given the comments made by the United States and Switzerland, and noting, I think, that in the introduction, the co-chair from the Animals Committee was pointing out that methods are evolving all the time. Would you be willing to live with that text as it stood originally, Indonesia?
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia can accept the original. We can accept the US and Switzerland suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. So the decisions in Annex 2 are recommended for adoption. I think we also need to delete the previous set of decisions which have now been implemented. So those are decisions 18.135 to 18.139. And just one final thing I want to check with the Secretariat. Okay, and if I didn't make it clear that we're suggesting adoption with the European Union's change to the additional preambular paragraph. So I think if we've captured that all correctly now, I think we can conclude discussion of this item and move on to document 44.2. And this topic is on the identification of timber and other wood products It has been submitted by the Plants Committee, and I assume I'm going to invite the Chair of the Plants Committee to introduce the document. And if so, Gabon, you have the floor. Yes.
Okay. Monsieur le Président.
Dear Chair, at its 18th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 1842, 1843 and renewed decision 16.58 Rev COP 18 on identification of timber and other wood products. These decisions addressed to the parties, the Plants Committee and the Secretariat, relate to identification materials for wood and other wood products. The working group established intersessionally submitted to the 25th session of the Plants Committee documents detailing the progress in the implementation of the above-mentioned decisions, as well as a compilation of wood identification resources updated by the Secretariat on the basis of the information document PC 25-11. On the basis of the recommendations of this working group, the Plants Committee has also requested the Secretariat, in close collaboration with the Plants Committee and the relevant experts, to publish on the relevant section of its website the updated wood identification resources. Furthermore, in its report to the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee, the Secretariat noted that some of the results of the task force on illegal trade in specimens of CITES listed tree species established by decision 18.79 might be relevant to the activities of the Plants Committee. The Conference of the Parties is invited to adopt the draft decisions as contained in the Annex 1 to the present document. Chair, before I give up the floor, I would like to invite the United States to take the floor as co-chair of the working group, as well as Canada, who would like to introduce document COP19 INF 97, which includes the amendments made by the North American region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair of the Plants Committee, and happy to hand the floor to the United States, followed by Canada. So, United States.
Thank you, Chair. With the numerous timber proposals recommended for adoption during this COP, we need this now more than ever for effective implementation and compliance with existing as well as these new listings. Therefore, the United States strongly supports the vital work of improving timber and wood product identification for CITES-listed tree species. As co-chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Timber Identification and Wood Products Working Group, we recall their report emanating from PC 25 shared the view that more work is needed to advance and fully implement the decisions that have been directed to it by the parties at their 18th meeting. To further this important work, the North American region proposed revised decisions found in information document COP19 INF 97. These decisions will continue the mandate of the Timber Identification Working Group and build on progress to date. The work will be informed by the Plants Committee in close collaboration with the Secretariat and relevant experts. The draft decisions create a focal point through the Plants Committee on a more coordinated effort by bringing together timber identification work that has occurred under other agenda items, such as the task force meeting on illegal trade in specimens of CITES-listed tree species, the Dalbergia checklist, and the digital repository developed as part of an FAO CITES-listed tree project. At the chair's convenience, we would invite our Canadian colleagues to share the draft decisions as found in information document CoP19, Inf 97 with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. If Canada wishes to do that now, the Chair of Plants Committee did indicate that in our opening remarks. So I give the floor to Canada to introduce suggested decisions.
Thank you, Chair. Canada thanks the Plans Committee for its report, as well as the co-chairs of the working group and the Secretariat for their work in advancing the CITES discussions and work on timber identification in challenging conditions. Canada also strongly believes there is considerable room for more work on timber identification beyond the compendium on wood identification resources. We consider it important to the Convention to address the complex challenges of identification of tree species found on the appendices. So I will read the draft amendments as suggested in information document 97. So in 19AA, directed to the Secretariat, the Secretariat shall, and we would add the word close, consultation with the Plans Committee. That's for the first sentence. We would add a new paragraph, little a, which reads, review the utility and practicality of the online repository, comma, and make recommendations on its development, semicolon. Then the paragraph, little a, would be renamed little b, and we would add words at the beginning, based on the outcomes of the review, comma. The paragraph stays the same. Paragraph little b is renamed paragraph little c, remains the same. Paragraph little c is renamed paragraph little d and remains the same. In the directed to parties 19BB, at the end, after decision 19AA, we would add and 19CC. In the directed to the Plans Committee 19CC, it would read, the Plans Committee shall, comma, in collaboration with relevant stakeholders and building on information on existing initiatives, comma, and progress to date, colon. We would add a new paragraph, A, develop a plan to prioritize the CITES listed tree species, to focus global efforts on developing and sharing identification reference databases and tools, comma, including sampling campaigns for vouchered reference samples, semicolon. We would add a new paragraph, little b, prioritize input to the development of identification material for Dalbergia species, comma, taking into consideration progress made in document PC25, document 34, and the Dalbergia checklist as included in resolution Conf 1211 Rev CoP19, comma, and giving attention to frontline identification materials to assist differentiating look-alike species that may not be of conservation concern, semicolon. We would add a new paragraph, little c, develop a list of available techniques and tools that are useful to identify specific CITES listed tree species and their look-alikes, semicolon. A new paragraph, little d, would come from previous decisions 18-140 little paragraph A, and would read, determine gaps and complementarities in various tools and knowledge sources for timber identification, comma, such as existing field identification guidelines and keys, comma, and on their availability and usefulness, semicolon. New paragraph little e also comes from previous decision 18-140, paragraph little b, and reads, develop standardized information templates and other tools that could be used by parties to facilitate sharing information on the content and status of wood sample collections, comma, and exchange with research institutions, comma, law enforcement agencies, comma, and other authorities, semicolon. New paragraph little f from decisions previous decision 18-140, paragraph little d, reads, determine methods to stimulate global, comma, regional, and national exchange of best practices in wood identification technologies between parties, comma, and here we would add a new part, including lessons learned on how parties have built their have built their timber identification capacity and expertise, semicolon, and now new paragraph little g would be the paragraph A that was proposed in the Annex 1, but at the beginning of the sentence, we would add, review the utility and practicality of the online repository, comma, and make recommendations on its development, comma, and the rest stays the same, consider progress and results reported by the Secretariat as per decision 1988. The paragraph little b from Annex 1 would now be h, little h, so we would keep it, but we would update that after the CITES listed 3 species presented in the annex, we would update it with Annex 1 to COP document 35, and we would delete the square brackets. From Annex 1, the little paragraph C, we would delete it and replace it with a new paragraph I, again from previous decisions, which reads, update the standing committee, comma, as appropriate, comma, on progress made, semicolon, and report its findings and recommendations for consideration by the conference of the parties at its 20th meeting, period. And we would keep 19DD the same. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Canada, for that comprehensive set of changes. So I hope parties have had a chance to absorb those, and I will open the floor for comments on the draft decisions in Annex 1 and any comments or views on the proposed changes from Canada. And of course, I also add my thanks to the working group that produced this material. So with that, I give the floor to, I see Mali, then Cameroon were first on my list.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I would like to focus on the intervention made by Gabon, made by Ms. Flo, to say that we support the document that was presented. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Marley, and I assume your support then is for the document as originally submitted. Yes, thank you. So I give the floor now to Cameroon, followed by the United Kingdom.
Merci. Thank you very much, Chair. Cameroon would like to start by congratulating the submitters of this document, and we would like to make a small observation on the draft decision in Annex 1. Although it is properly indicated in the title, Identification of Timber and Other Wood Products, in the decision in 19AA, we don't see this full formulation. Maybe it's a question of language translation, but in many countries we really differentiate timber and other wood products. So it's important that when we speak about identification of timber, that we really do add and other wood products. That's important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. So that would be a change into 19AA little a and then little b. And I don't think it comes up anywhere else. But thank you for that suggested change. So we've captured that. So I give the floor now to the United Kingdom, followed by India.
Thank you, Chair. The United Kingdom would like to thank the Plants Committee and the Secretariat for their work on identification of timber since CoP18. We would like to compliment the Secretariat on their work in getting the timber identification tool on the CITES website. We feel that this is an important first step in a longer process to enable better implementation of CITES regulations for timber species. We agree with the recommendations in InfDoc 97 and support the draft decisions and the proposed revisions. We do, however, have some suggested edits to decision 19.cc within InfDoc 97, which we believe will improve the focus of the working group's mandate and enable it to make more substantive progress. With your indulgence, Chair, I would read them out for the parties.
Yes, UK, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Our suggested edits are 19.cc. The Plants Committee shall, paragraph B, propose changes to text with the new paragraph reading. Prioritise the development of identification material for Dalbergia species, comma, taking into consideration progress made in document PC 25 Doc 34 and document CoP19 Doc 84.1, comma, and giving attention to frontline identification materials to assist differentiating lookalike species that may not be of conservation concern. Paragraph C. Proposed deletion of text and new paragraph will read: develop a list of available techniques and tools, comma, and evaluate their standards and usefulness to species-specific identification and enforcement for CITES-listed tree species and their lookalikes. Paragraph D. Proposed deletion of text and new paragraph will read: determine gaps in current knowledge sources for CITES timber identification, comma, on their availability and usefulness, comma, and consider challenges and resourcing required to make these tools more widely available to CITES parties. Paragraph F, delete the word "and" at the end of the paragraph. Paragraph G, deletion of text and new paragraph to read: review the utility and practicality of the online repository and make recommendations on its development to inform implementation of decision 19.AA. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to give, I'll hear interventions from, I've got three parties on the screen, India, China and the European Union. I'll give the floor to each of those and then try to conclude. This is potentially becoming very complicated to follow. So India, then China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India appreciates the work done by the Plants Committee and the Intersessional Working Group. India also takes note of the information document CoP19 in 97, submitted by Canada, the United States of America, and Mexico in relation with document CoP19, Doc 1444.2, on identification of timber and other wood products. Underscoring the urgent requirement for development of identification toolkits for plant species which are of least conservation concern and are directly related to the livelihoods of local communities, India supports the proposal made by Canada, the United States of America, and Mexico. However, would like to suggest inclusion of additional text after the words conservation concern in the end of paragraph small b of decision 19cc as proposed, quote, such as Dalbergia sisu, unquote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. So I think we have captured that, your insertion into 19cc small b, which is the amendment from Canada, which they've read out into the record, but is also available in information document 97. I'll take China, then the European Union, then I'll try and come up with a way forward.
Thank you, Chair. China appreciates the great efforts made by the Secretariat and the Plants Committee on the identification of timber and other wood products, especially for the timber identification resources and tools web page. China supports the draft decisions in Annex 1 to the document 44.2 with amendments by Canada. China will collaborate with the Secretary in sharing relevant information in support of the implementation of Decision 19AA and contribute to our digital resources of new publication and identification menu for CITES list tree species and their lookalikes to the timber identification resources and tools web page. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. I now give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. I would just ask you maybe to read the new insertion by India again, please.
Certainly. So it's this is in the amendments read out by Canada. So it's 19cc and paragraph B, which I think is a new paragraph B. And that paragraph begins by prioritize input to the development of identification material for Dalbergia species, and continues, and the text at the end would read, to assist differentiating lookalike species that may not be of conservation concern, such as Dalbergia sisu. So the insertion from India was such as Dalbergia sisu, if that helps European Union.
Yeah. No. Thank you, Chair. That's very useful. I don't think we actually would need those, that reference at the end to Dalbergia sisu, because we already talked about Dalbergia species. And if it's helpful, we agree to the insertions by the North American region, Cameroon, and the UK.
Okay, thank you. European Union, just give me a minute, please. So we've had some fairly lengthy and sort of fairly complicated amendments proposed. Oh, sorry, United States. I was just about to try and sum up, but...
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the time, and the United States agrees and would be able to accept India's additions, and very respectfully disagrees with the EU on that specific matter. Thank you.
So going forward, as I was saying, we've had a fairly comprehensive set of amendments proposed coming from Canada on behalf of North America region, which have been read into the record. Those have been amended again by the United Kingdom, and then we've heard the interventions from India wishing to insert Dalbergia Sisu. The United States support that, but the European Union didn't. So I'd quite like to go back to India in terms of how strongly you feel about your reference to Dalbergia Sisu. Clearly there's 27 parties here that don't support it, and I've only heard 2 that are in favour of your insertion. And if you could live without it, that would perhaps help us to move forward here.
Thank you, Chair. As it has been discussed, and reference to Dalbergia Sisu as an example would definitely help the Plans Committee to take the work forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so India, you wish to retain your insertion. I see you nodding, and I'll look to the EU. Do you wish to give way on that? Or?
I suppose under the criteria for listing species in the CITES appendices, we would say it would still meet the CITES look-alike criterion, so still would be of conservation concern. While we do support India's position, we feel that it would be covered under the whole group of Dalbergia.
Okay. We need to find a way forward. Let's just move on to something else for a moment. We've had other suggested changes from Cameroon, I think, to make some minor changes elsewhere in the tax about timber and other wood products. On the whole, there seems to be support for the Canada/North America suggested insertions, followed by the UK interventions. I see you asking for the floor again. EU, do you want to go back on Dalbergia? Or?
Yeah, no, we're happy enough if India want to specify that at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, EU, for your flexibility. So I think with that, I think in different circumstances, if we weren't dealing with this document so late in the day, and that's partly a casualty of it being transferred from Committee 2 working program to ours, and the delays that we've had, we may have looked to set up a drafting group or a working group to resolve this, but we can't. So I think with all those comprehensive amendments, I noted right at the beginning, I think Marley and perhaps others supported were commenting on the original text. And I wonder, Marley, given that you've heard a strength of support for the changes proposed by North America, whether you could live with those? Yes? Okay, thank you, Marley. So with all the comprehensive amendments we've had, Secretariat will clearly put this together in a document that you'll all be able to consider in time for the plenary. But I think with that we can probably close debate on document 44.2. So thank you very much for your cooperation, and we will now move on to deal with item 51, or document 51, which is on quotas for leopard, Panthera pardus hunting trophies. And I believe this will be introduced by the chair of the Animals Committee, so you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I present this document on behalf of the Standing Committee. At CoP18, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18165 to 1870 on quotas for leopards. The Secretariat wrote to the countries which had not been able to provide the relevant information in the previous period, namely Botswana, the Central African Republic, and Ethiopia. At AC 31, responses from all three countries could be considered. The Animals Committee agreed to inform the Standing Committee that it considers the quotas for leopards from the Central African Republic and Botswana, as mentioned in Resolution Conf 1014 Ref COP 16, to be set at levels which are non-detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild. The committee further agreed to inform the Standing Committee that for Ethiopia, it considers the proposed reduction of the quota for leopards in Resolution Conf 14 Refs COP 16 from 500 to 20 trophies to be set at levels which are non-detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild. Furthermore, the Animals Committee recalled that at its 70th meeting, the Standing Committee agreed to propose to the Conference of the Parties draft amendments to Resolution Conf 1014, Ref COP 16, so as to remove quotas for Kenya and Malawi from this resolution, following the request to do so by these countries. See Standing Committee SR. However, at COP18, the issue was not brought to the attention of Committee 1, and the proposed deletion of Kenya's and Malawi's quotas was therefore not agreed, and as it had not been proposed. At its 74th meeting, the Standing Committee endorsed the recommendations of the Animals Committee and therefore invites the Conference of the Parties to amend paragraph 1A of Resolution Conf 1014 Ref COP 16 on quotas for leopard hunting trophies and skins for personal use by changing the quota indicated for Ethiopia from 500 to 20 and by removing the quotas for Kenya and Malawi. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee, for that introduction, and I open, as always, the floor for parties. So I see Niger followed by Mali.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. At COP18, a set of decisions were made on hunting trophies quotas for leopard, and the Secretariat was invited range states and experts to draw up guidelines on the making of NDFs for trade in leopard hunting trophies. We are concerned to see that said directives were not developed. At the same time, the export quotas for leopards remain high. Scientific articles criticize the fact that the quotas do not have a scientific basis and are based on inexact methodologies. So we request that this Conference of the Parties considers suspending all quotas until the guidance on NDFs is completed, and that the Animals Committee and the Standing Committee have had an opportunity to examine them. Thank you.
Thank you, Niger. I give the floor to Mali, followed by the European Union.
Merci bien.
Thank you very much, Chair. As has been highlighted by my neighbor from Niger, the situation of the leopard populations is critical. Decisions 18165 to 170 show that it's a question of reviewing the status in the range states, and that was requested for CoP19. Trophy hunting remains an important factor for certain species. We have a population between Mali and Senegal, and we have seen that today there is a great deal of pressure on the species within these areas. So we are very aware that poaching is a major factor in not only on local populations, but also for specimens that come from elsewhere. So in 18169, on the development of NDF guidelines has not all been carried out. So it is urgent that we look at the sustainable management of leopards, both on a national and international level. And we'd like to thank the Standing Committee and the Animals Committee for having carried out excellent work. But it is important to look at the issue of quotas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mali. I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Ethiopia.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states support the draft decision as presented by the Standing Committee. In addition, we see a need for regular assessments and reviews of quotas to address population dynamics. Therefore, we would like to propose the following two amendments to the decisions proposed by the Secretariat as outlined in Working Document 51 on page 3. In Decision 18-166, after are encouraged to, we would like to insert conduct regular surveys, comma, adjust quotas as appropriate and then the text continues. So it reads all together, all parties which have quotas for leopard hunting trophies established under Resolution Conf 10.14, Ref CoP16, are encouraged to conduct regular surveys, adjust quotas as appropriate, and exchange information and lessons learned regarding the process of determining that such quotas are non-detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild. And we have a second insertion in point decision 18-168. After the Animals Committee shall review, we want to insert on regular basis as appropriate. So the complete decision would then read as the Animals Committee shall review on regular basis as appropriate any information submitted by the Secretariat under Decision 18-169, Ref CoP19, and make recommendations to the Secretariat and leopard range states as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Ethiopia, followed by Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. Ethiopia appreciates the Secretariat for taking forward Decision 18.165, requesting the range states to review their leopard hunting quota as contained in resolution COP.10.14 Rev COP16 to consider if the level is non-detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild. Also, we appreciate the Animal Committee for considering the information submitted by Ethiopia, which justifies the quota for leopard is set at a level which would be non-detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild. Therefore, Ethiopia fully supports the adoption of the recommendation endorsed by the Standing Committee at its 74th meeting, and then the comments of the Secretariat as directed to parties, the Animal Committee, and the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ethiopia. I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the Standing Committee for preparing this document. Kenya has not issued hunting permits for leopards for many years, so we will be pleased to finally see the removal of the quota allocated to Kenya. Chair, there is considerable uncertainty around the status of leopard populations, yet quota numbers continue to be established on the basis of outdated or unreliable population data established using inaccurate methodologies. Recent scientific studies have highlighted the damage caused to fragile leopard populations through selective removal of leopards by trophy hunters. We also note that Decision 18.169C, which mandates the Secretariat to develop guidance to assist parties in determining non-detrimental findings for trade in leopard trophies, has not yet been fulfilled. We therefore urge parties to agree to a far more regular review system for leopard hunting quotas by the Animal Committee, which in our view should take place in each intersessional period, and to exercise restraint in issuing permits while outstanding decisions are fulfilled. Kenya also agrees to the amendment, inclusion of the amendments suggested by the European Union, because it is very important to issue quota based on recent census results. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. I give the floor now to Japan, followed by Namibia.
Thank you, Chair. Japan supports the recommendation in the current document with an amendment from the EU. We welcome the efforts of the three orange states in having prepared the relevant information to examine the proposed quotas and achieve active discussion by the members of the Animal Committee and the orange states at the ACES 31. We believe that such communication leads to establish the quota by the best available science with deeper understanding of the local situation. Trophy hunting based on scientific data and with effective management and governance can positively impact both species conservation and IPLC's livelihood. We hope that such process of CITES continues to work well to sustain such positive effects of trophy hunting. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor to Namibia, followed by Central African Republic.
Thank you, Chairperson. Namibia thanks the Standing Committee for submitting document COP19.51. We agree with the recommendations of the Standing Committee to amend Resolution COP 10.14. We also agree with the comments of the Secretariat contained in paragraph B and C regarding the relevant decisions. The EU proposed amendment, we still have to consider that. But regarding the hunting quota for Botswana, Namibia fully agrees with the conclusion of the Animals Committee that the quota is sustainable and should therefore be retained at its current level. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Namibia, I give the floor to the Central African Republic, followed by Botswana.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. The Central African Republic is one of the parties that has a quota for leopard hunting trophies and skins. In 2020, we established an NDF, which was submitted to the Animals Committee at its 31st meeting in relation to Resolution 10.14 Rev CoP16. And this NDF shows clearly that these quota are not set at a level which would be harmful to the survival of the species. So first of all, we'd like to congratulate the Standing Committee and the Animals Committee, and we support the recommendations made by the committee and the comments of the Secretariat, and we support the amendments suggested by the European Union as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Central African Republic, I give the floor to Botswana, followed by the Gambia.
Thank you for the floor, Chair. Botswana thanks the Standing Committee for document CoP19 Doc 51. Overall, Botswana is okay with the text and decisions in the document. As stated in para 3 and 4 of the document, both the Animal Committee and Standing Committee consider the Botswana quota as non-detrimental to leopards in Botswana. In this regard, Botswana continues to improve the scientific basis for managing leopards. In 2022, we started a survey to systematically investigate the geographic distribution of leopards in Botswana and ascertain densities in sample areas through intensive spatial capture recapture studies aided by camera trapping. Botswana is one of the few studies after Namibia to do a national survey of leopards in Africa. The National Leopard Survey will involve rural communities and other stakeholders so as to factor their aspirations. Botswana is about to finish the first phase of this National Leopard Survey in the northern part of the country and soon roll it out to other parts. Moreover, Botswana is finalizing a National Leopard Management Plan 2023 to 28, which was developed through a bottom-up stakeholder process. This is awaiting approval by the executive so that it is launched first quarter of 2023. It will be one of the first countrywide management and action plans developed for leopards in the whole world. Botswana has experiences in managing leopards, and we share experiences of developing our management plan in COP Info 65. Chair, in relation to the proposed decisions, on the basis of experiences from Botswana and other range states, particularly in Southern Africa, we propose deletion of the new point B under decision 18.169. This is because COP 10.14, revised at COP 16, directs, and I quote under 2, directs the Secretariat to report deficiencies of the system or specific instances of concern to the Standing Committee and the relevant parties as appropriate. End quote. So parties are already setting the leopard quotas on the basis of scientific processes, which are cleared by both the Animal Committee and the Standing Committee. So if this process has any inadequacies, then the Secretariat should first undertake a report to identify these inadequacies as per the point cited point 2 of this Conf 10.14 revised 2016. It is only then that any consideration of guidance could be discussed. So at this point, we are unaware of any need for this guidance as called for by this decision. Actually, adopting the decision will just be a waste of the limited resources that the Secretariat has. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Botswana. If you just give me a second, we're coming up to lunchtime. Thank you. We're 2 minutes to lunchtime now, and we're clearly not. I've got a list of speakers already kind of in front of me. We're not going to finish this agenda item now, so I suggest we adjourn for lunch. I'm going to ask the technicians if they can keep a record of the list as it stands at the moment, though it does include an observer, and I haven't opened the floor for observers yet. I've taken a photograph as well, so that I've got a record of the parties requesting the floor. So, excuse me, with that, and it's just coming up to 12 o'clock, we'll break for lunch. After lunch, we'll conclude this agenda item. We will be continuing with the listing proposals and look to continue where we left off last night. I will also be picking up those ComDocs, which we still need to address. I'll decide the order of things after lunch, but basically that's the agenda, everything that's left. Listing proposals that we haven't done, ComDocs that we haven't done, and concluding this agenda item. One final thing that I forgot when we were in the discussions of document 44.2, which were getting a little bit complicated, and in all of that, I forgot that we needed to delete some decisions, 18.140 to 18.143, and decision 16.58 Rev CoP18, as they've either been completed or they were carried forward in the new proposed set of decisions. So with apologies for my oversight there, I think we can break for lunch now. Thank you very much.